A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bashim Yamushai, Bashim Makakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us this truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquav and Millicent. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to read through this article which discusses the impact of AI essentially on the environment. And it says here, majority of the US's new AI data centers to be built on drought-hit land. It says a record-shattering drought has been racked much of the US, but the artificial intelligence industry is pushing ahead regardless, with the majority of the planned data centers to be set and built on drought-ridden locations, the Guardian analysis has found. It says about 2/3 of the upcoming data centers, which typically require large amounts of water to operate, is said to be built and that have been among the driest in the country over the past year. It says over 809 planned data centers and 517 are in locations that have been in drought conditions throughout the past year, according to the data from CleanView and the federal government, which grades drought across 4 levels of severity. Right, so it says more than 60% of the contiguous U.S. is currently at varying stages of drought. Large expanse for spring in modern records, with particularly severe lack of rain and snow in the southeast and west, desiccating croplands and raising fears of disastrous wildlife season. Let me get that word, How do you say that? Desiccating. Interesting. Let me just get that word for edification. Just so I can get an understanding, or we, I should say, can get an understanding of what is actually being done to the crops. Here it says to desiccate means to remove the moisture from a substance, causing it to be completely dry, right? It says here it frequently refers to the drying of things thoroughly for preservations. So they normally do this as a process for making certain foods, such as dried foods, right, like raisins and so on and so forth, right? So basically to dehydrate, something, right? So that's pretty much, what the AI data centers are doing, to the environment. And it has a lot of, essentially a lot of environmental impacts because it requires large amounts of water to be able to sustain it, right? They say, they talk about, the impact in terms of economic prosperity. It's going to bring all these different jobs. It's going to bring lots of employment to be able to maintain these centers, but at the same time, at what expense? When you look at the expense of it, basically you're doing this, Esau is doing this at a rate where, okay, the land that you're living on, it's leading to more plagues, right? So what I wanted to do, let me read this first here. This is Sirach chapter 39, verse 26. And it says, the principal things for the whole use of a man's life are water, fire, iron, and salt, the flour of wheat, honey, milk, the blood of the grape, and oil, and clothing. All these things are for the godly, so our sinners they turned into evil. So you start to see these things in specifically are used for the principal uses of a man's life, because you know it's not like one thing that actually utilizes water itself. It's not, it's basically, it surrounds life as a whole. If you're a farmer, not even just now but like in ancient times, you needed basically rain. You needed to be able to grow your crops. You needed to make sure your animals were well fed, your animals drank. You basically were somebody who lived off the land. You know what I'm saying? Or even if you were just growing, grapes, or if you had pomegranate trees or so on and so forth back in ancient times, you know, all these things require water to be able to carry out your endeavors, to be able to take care of your livelihood. And maybe you had a family, right? These things, because we're basically a nation, we lived off of the land, so to speak, right? With our I was going to say cats, um, goats, sheep, cattle, um, and then you utilize the trees that, you utilize the blessings, the Lord gave us, right? Because when we went into the time of Joshua, the different tribes received their different parts of the land, right? So that part of the land, basically, we needed rain. As a matter of fact, give me 1 second. I believe that's in it's at Deuteronomy 11. Okay, this is Deuteronomy 11. I'll start at verse 10 and read down, right? And this basically, it goes into, what's the title here? It says rewards, for obedience, right? And it says here, it says, so for the land whither thou goest in to possess it is not a land of Egypt, whence ye came out, right? Because we were in a time where we were in slavery, in Egypt, right? And we were dwelling in the wilderness. The Lord fed us, with manna and quails and so on and so forth, right? So just showing, as we were going into, that new land, right? This is how it's being, described, right? It says here, where thou sowest thy seed and waterest it with thy foot as a garden of herbs. But the land whither ye go to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinketh water of the rain of heaven, a land which the Lord Yahweh thy power careth for. The eyes of the Lord thy power are always upon it, from the beginning of the year even unto the end of the year. So ultimately, when we were in the land, we required that substance. We required that care from Yahweh Bashim Shai, from, to be able to take care of our sheep or goats or cattle, to be able to manage our livelihood, But, our people, you know, when it comes to, what's the word I'm looking for? People are very disobedient. That's pretty much that's pretty much the best way, to put it in a nutshell, right? And it says here, and it shall come to pass, if you hearken diligently unto my commandments which I command you this day, to love the Lord your power and serve him with all thy heart and with all your soul, I will give you the rain of the land in his due season the first rain and the latter rain, that thou mayest gather thy corn and thy wine and thine oil, right? So all these things require, these things require water to do. you know so I'm reading this, just to show you the importance of not just only being in tune with the Lord, like we required those things when we were in the land, right? So we weren't supposed to be turning away after these other gods and so on and so forth. But, going back really to the main point, the water is really, really, really important, right? So you start to see, as we're back here, reuniting, the tribes are all together within this place known as America. You start to see those plagues now are starting to hit the land, right? You're starting to see that, there is a decline within the society where it's like, okay, just like how you had like plagues in ancient Egypt, right? Now the Lord is going to smite this modern day spiritual Sodom and Egypt with plagues and pestilence and so on and so forth, right? Because this is a land that's basically it's defiled. This land is it's not a place where you can rest. It's a land where it's at some point, prior to, Esau coming here, it was actually beautiful, but like now you start to see what happens when you're under an unwise king, I should say. Scriptures say an unwise king, destroyeth the people, right? So, now you have all these data centers sucking up and consuming all this water. Now what people don't have the resources to drink, right? So this is why, going back to this point about hearken diligently, and this is why our people, should find the importance of repenting, right? Because the scriptures say, to let me see, seek ye the Lord basically while he may be found, right? And call upon him when he's near, because this is, because these are things that you need to be able to survive, right? One second. This is Habakkuk 2 verse 4, and it says, behold, the soul that is within it, that is lifted up, is not upright in him, right? Esau is not an upright individual, because he's taking the things that are supposed to be natural, and he's using it for nonsense, because you're not you're basically acquiring all this land, you know and you're not using the resources of the earth to its full potential in the right way. So now all these things that you're using, the water, for example, and all those different lists of things that were specified in that first scripture I read, all those things are basically turned into evil. Your nutrients are lacking, within certain foods, like for example, the honey and the milk and so on and so forth, because it's pasteurized. So all these things that Esau touches, it's turned into evil. It's not working for you, but rather it's working against you, right? So but finishing up here in Habakkuk 2 verse 4, and it says, but the just shall live by his faith, right? So and I wanted to to read this, because we'll need essentially examples and basically like miracles within these times, right? Because like when you have all these $1 million companies building all these different centers all over the country, it's gonna lead to, and the capacity that these machines need to be able to cool down and the amount of water they consume, it's like, okay, you're now having to deal with plagues, right? Now you're gonna have to deal with shortages, right? You're gonna have to deal with the what's the scripture say? Basically the love of many waxing cold, because it's gonna cause a scarcity, it's not going to when people, it's going to be a lot different in terms of like how things are going to operate as opposed to how things were in COVID, because you're not going to have the abundance as things were, right? There's going to be a shortage, right? And that's one of the things that you need every day. You need to be able to drink water, I don't want to say every day, but it's something that it's a necessity. That's pretty much the point. I believe it's 3 days they say, that you can go without it, right? So it just shows you the value and the importance of it, right? But our people basically, when it comes to, as a matter of fact, let me read this in Jeremiah, and then I wanted to read this here. Let me see one second. This is Jeremiah 8 verse 7. And it says, Yea, the stork in the heaven knoweth her appointed times, and the turtle and the crane and the swallow observe time of their coming, but my people don't know not, I'm sorry, the judgment of the Lord, right? So, all these things that are occurring are examples of, judgments, right? And basically, and it's funny actually as well, because in the ancient, I just wanted to read something that happened in one of our ancient, kings, where the prophet Elijah basically, prophesied of basically, no rain, right? So, what happened was, King Ahab, he was basically going off, right? And he had that wicked wife, Jezebel, you know, um, with him, right? So I wanted to read this, as an example, of what's it called, like example of things that are written aforetime, written for our learning, and the power of the Lord as well, right? Because in these times, expect also miracles as well. This is First Kings 17:1, and it says, and Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, as the Lord Yahweh power of Israel liveth, from whom I stand, there shall be there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word, right? So there was a time when it didn't rain, and it says, and the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto him, saying, get thee hence, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself by a brook Cherith, that it is before Jordan. It shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there, right? So, basically the Lord gave Elijah the instructions to go at a brook. So a brook is basically like it's like a small river, so to speak, right? And but it shows you the difference between the righteous, and then the what's going to happen to the mass majority of our people, right? Because you know our people are going to get caught up in understanding and not actually making their supplication, right, to the Lord, while they had that time to do so, and actually repenting, right? So you start to see that, Elijah was, even though there was a drought, the Lord, still looked out, for Elijah, during that time. And even when you go later on in the story as well, there was a widow that he encountered, and he was able to actually get some to eat as well, right? So, there's a Psalm of David that says, I've never seen the righteous, forsaken, nor his seed begging bread, right? So, you start to see basically the perks of being in tune with the Lord, and then the perks of actually, exemplifying righteousness. And what I'm saying, because look, when they look at our people, don't see it, they don't see the value in it, right? And if there's anything, understanding your enemy, your enemy, utilizes the resources to be able to control the people, right? So um he's going to do the same thing, utilizing, the MOTB, to be able to control the people, right? So I'm kind of going all over the place, with this talking point, but it shows you the importance of water. It shows you the importance of, a righteous rulership, care for the animals. These AI data centers, these things are actually causing more harm to the environment, actually than actually doing good. As a matter of fact, let me get Revelation 6. One second. This is Revelation 6 and 4. And it says, and there went out another horse that was red, and power was given unto him, and sat thereon to take peace from the earth. And they shall kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword, right? So Esau, um, you know, through his his father Isaac, was blessed, with the sword when you go back into the story of in Genesis, right? And then he would acquire basically the fatness, of the earth, right? But you start to see the detrimental effects of what happens, when you rule and you use that technology to be able to acquire substance and resources, because he's not actually utilizing the resources of the earth, properly, because he's not somebody who has a fear of the Lord. He's knowledgeable, but he's not he doesn't have any wisdom, because the scriptures say the knowledge of wickedness is not wisdom, because you don't actually fear the heavenly Father, right? So he's seeing, and utilizing, and acquiring all these resources, but he's not somebody who's very, intelligent. So because it compromises the welfare of not just the people, but the animals, the animals that require this, the plants, that's another thing as well. The plants, the trees, require, water as well, right? So let's go, I'll go here. This is Second Ezra chapter 15, verse 5, and it says, Behold, saith the Lord Yahweh, I will bring plagues upon the world, and the sword, famine, death, and destruction. Excuse me. For wickedness hath exceeding polluted the whole earth, and their hurtful works are fulfilled. Right. So this is that's basically like a famine. Basically, that's what's happening. If the AI centers are actually consuming all this water, then it's not just about drinking water alone. That's that isn't part of it, but as well as you can't actually grow crops, because the crops, require an irrigation system to be able to be nourished, so they can actually be germinated properly and cultivated properly, so the people would have something to eat. But if there's no water, then okay, it's going to be, it's going to lead to a famine. It's going to lead to shortages, and that's going to perpetuate, as Yahweh Shai said, the love of many basically waxing cold, because you're not going to have the abundance of resources, as you would, so that's why I read, it's really important to for you Israelites to seek the Lord while you may be found, right? So that's pretty much it. Lord's will, this lesson was just quick and edifying. The scriptures say, seek righteousness, seek meekness, that you may be hidden the day of the Lord's wrath, right? So yeah, we're in a situation, where we need, divine protection, and basically divine protection and intervention, right? Because, Esau is not somebody who's intelligent to be able to control the resources. So I'll leave the lesson there, but, Lord's will, this was just quick and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashmiel Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.